warm welcome to Season 2 of the Realise Mindfulness podcast. This season our theme is mindful compassion, and together we'll explore some of the core themes and practices from one of the leading mindful compassion courses. That's Mindfulness-Based Compassionate Living. Episode 1 of the podcast begins with an interview with one of the course developers, Erik van Brink. And in our conversation, Erik offers a broad yet deep insight into compassion, and specifically the MBCL course, its origins, and what it offers to participants. And then in every episode, we'll explore a key theme of mindful compassion, as offered by the Mindfulness-Based Compassionate Living course. And a short disclaimer at this point. The course is a rich and a deep one, and this podcast is in no way a replacement for attending an 8-week course. Rather, it is intended as either an introduction, or a companion, or refresher for the course. And if you are interested in finding out more, of course I'll include some helpful links in the show notes. So, without further ado, let's begin today's episode as we explore with Erik van Brink the question of what is mindful compassion? Thank you so much, Erik, for joining me today on the Realise Mindfulness podcast. It feels such a privilege to be speaking with you today and to be able to share this conversation with listeners. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Kate. And thank you for inviting me for this. I feel excited to join.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure, and to share with listeners. We met recently. We met at the end of last year as I was lucky enough to be attending the teacher training for your Mindfulness-Based Compassionate Living program, which was a very deep and immersive training, and thank you very much for that. I think the insights, the learning's still rippling for me. But midway through that, I approached you and asked whether you'd be prepared to allow me to explore with listeners the wonderful, rich content, some of it, because it's such a full programme, of the Mindfulness-Based Compassionate Living programme. And you kindly agreed, and I suggested that the best way to start would be really getting some thoughts from you as to how the programme came about and why the themes of mindful compassion are so important to you and your co-founder Fritz.
Yeah, so would you like me to start with answering that straight away, or perhaps have a little taste of a practice to settle ourselves and the people listening to us?
Yeah, thank you so much for suggesting that. I think that would be a perfect start to just settle together.
Okay, let's do that. I actually have a gong here, so I may sound a bell, and with the bell we can perhaps find ourselves a comfortable position and practice some mindful minutes. So you may have a lot of experience with mindfulness, or you just tune in and have very little experience. Whatever background you have, whatever your motivation to join in today, the invitation here is to simply pause in our busyness, pause in the normal busyness of our everyday life, and take a moment just to be aware of what arises this moment. What our experience is like in the way of physical sensations we may notice when we pause, in the way of feelings or thoughts that may be occurring from moment to moment. And we don't have to push anything away, it's simply giving it space. Giving it space in a wider awareness, noticing, simply noticing, without having to do something, simply being with what is. And both being aware and being kindly aware can be a way to start this session. You may be aware of your breath, and if your breath is sort of at ease and flows unhindered, simply observing the breath, as choosing the breath as a way of allowing your attention to rest, but without having to push anything else away. And you can also consciously, when the breath is not flowing so easily, allow the breath to have more space, to flow out unhindered, to flow in unhindered. And allowing to deepen the breath to somewhat, finding a slower pace, without forcing anything. Being with the breath, being with the body, being with all kinds of phenomena that may enter our consciousness, moment by moment, pleasant or unpleasant. And perhaps connecting with yourself. How are you sitting here today? You may have joined in with a particular motivation. So what would be kindness for yourself, a kind wish for this session? Something you would really wish yourself from the heart. And without having to fulfill this wish, it's not about achieving for effect, but simply as a kind intention to offer yourself at the beginning of this session. Perhaps allowing this kindness to flow through you. As a word, a short sentence. And now with the sound of the bell, allowing yourself to end this short practice, but without having to part from this intention to be aware and to be kindly aware, while you keep on listening to what comes, moment by moment.
Thank you so much, Erik. That was beautiful, and I think just what I needed to help me settle and arrive in our conversation in a grounded way. Thank you.
Thank you for joining. I mean, it's what I needed as well. Yes.
Yeah, it's why we do the work, isn't it?
Yes.
So yeah, I guess that leads naturally in a way into the question that I posed previously. I'd be really interested to hear a little from you about how you came to this work and why it's so important to you.
Well, how do they come to this work? It is a fairly long story. I've always been interested since my student years, at least, when I was studying medicine and meditation, but really as a kind of private thing. I did it for myself. I didn't join any groups, but I sort of felt I did have the guidance from several books, and when I meditated, paused in silence, like we just did, really, simply observing myself and my experience, it gave me a peace of mind that I very much needed. It took a long while before I actually found a form to practice it regularly, and I did it sometimes intensively for longer periods, and then I did hardly do it for a longer period. So it was a sort of up and down thing in my life. But gradually, when I actually came to England, I finished my medical study in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. I came to England to further specialize in psychiatry. And I began to feel the same need, and also our sons were born in England. We had a young family, and we actually found there a way of sharing this need to become silent in a community. We joined a society of friends where there were regularly silent meetings, and we were there for 7-8 years, and then I returned to Holland and trying to find a kind of regular thing to meditate, which there wasn't anything equivalent to the silent meetings we had in the UK. But then that was in 1995 when we returned, I began to practice regular meditation in the Vipassana tradition for quite some time. That's where I, without knowing we would become colleagues in another 10 years or so, but I met already Fritz briefly and several Vipassana meditation teachers. And later on I switched to Zen, to a form of Chinese Zen with a Dutch Zen master. So I went to retreats regularly, I went to a meditation group regularly. But all the time I sort of kept it secret from my colleagues, because when I was on about meditation, then I had a lot of frowns and people looking at me, what are you doing? It was at the time, this was not normal yet, particularly not in the north of Holland with colleagues in psychiatry and psychology. So I did it as sort of undercover, and only beginning of this millennium, I think 2003, 2004, it became known that there was actually a problem learning people to meditate. MBSR had already quite some history, but then also some good studies were done with MBCT, and from that moment I had a sort of green light to say mental health care, you see, this can be useful for our patients.
Yes.
And actually got the permission to follow schooling in MBCT and then provide courses for patients, and soon after that also for colleagues who gradually dropped in and became interested, and from there onwards it sort of helped me in bringing two parts of my life together, really, which was kind of separated, and helping me what was really very precious for me, to help to bring that into my work and offer it to patients and colleagues. So
That's interesting, because in a way I feel that, having been a participant on the course myself a few times, that integration is actually a kind of a theme that does thread through the course in perhaps an unspoken way. So it's interesting that your own journey to creating it was a journey of integration in a way.
it definitely was, yes.
Yeah.
So that's how I started to work with not just MBCT, also MBSR, because we didn't want to restrict this offer to people with depression only. MBCT was particularly valid for people with recurrent depression. But we have, all kinds of patients with anxiety disorders, with burnout, with eating disorders, with personality problems, relational problems. So really, I was looking to a program that was accessible for people with all kinds of problems, really. And everybody, also in mental health care, has some sort of stress. So MBSR was actually a better format as a sort of foundational course, but we added in quite a few ingredients from MBCT, which were also useful for people with all kinds of problems, really, and also for us as helpers in mental health care. I like about these approaches that it addresses really the universal mechanisms that contribute to our suffering.
Yes.
Both in our patients and us as professional carers.
Yes. It speaks to the core of what it is to be human.
That's right.
Yeah. So you've spoken a bit about how you were able to integrate your own personal practice of mindfulness with the work that you were doing. And how does compassion come into it? How does the compassion thread link in?
So why actually did we develop a compassion training? That actually started when we got more interest in our mindfulness courses, and I felt the need to employ somebody like Fritz, who was a meditation teacher and a mindfulness teacher. So we met again after quite a few years, and from that time we began to work together quite intensively. We started teaching mindfulness together to both clients in the mental health care and also professionals. We began to offer teacher trainings in the mental health care. And from questions we got from our participants, increasingly we felt a need to develop a follow-on program. Many people said this was a great help, these 8 weeks, but it's so difficult to carry it forward and give it a place in my daily life, particularly around this business of becoming kinder with myself. I've been critical with myself all my life, and this is such a culture shock to really become kind to yourself. Many people had strong inner critics, not just among our patients, also among our colleagues, and also within ourselves we recognize this. It's a kind of cultural phenomenon that we have harsh inner critics, it seems. So, of course, in MBSR already, MBCT, you offer a taste of the kindness practices derived from the metta meditation, offering yourself kind wishes. But many people find that quite difficult. They actually have strong, what we call backdraft, that they feel they couldn't receive this kindness from themselves. They felt a resistance. And really, to find a way to let it in, it really, made us develop a second program which was more explicit about the kindness and compassion practices, and to make that the main focus of the course. So building on the first foundational course, the mindfulness skills already established, we designed this program that could build on these skills and further cultivate kindness and compassion towards themselves and others. When most people generally say, who came to the course, with compassion to others, I don't have so many problems, but it's myself that I found the most difficult. And still, it proved that actually to have both sides of compassion addressed, compassion to yourself and compassion to others, was both worthwhile to develop that hand in hand. Because often when we think we're compassionate to others, we actually offer them the help we think they need rather than what they really need. So it was important, we felt, to address it, both sides, and to have this all-inclusive definition of compassion, that it addresses the suffering in ourselves and others, and also, which is, in the first place, this sensitivity to suffering, whether we are the suffering or somebody else, and also this motivation to do something about it wherever we can. And so it's not just a passive thing. It's really also a way of, well, finding a way to put it into practice.
Yeah. Thank you. And you've raised some really important themes there. I'm really glad you gave voice to this fact that so many of us, myself included, and the participants that I work with, this struggle sometimes to direct the kindness inwards initially can feel so uncomfortable. It really does take practice. I'm very grateful to your course for nurturing me on that journey over the last 3 or 4 years, and just seeing the shift that's opened up for me, and first the way I relate to myself, but then the ripples, of course, the ripples that it has in our other relationships. I think that's such a beautiful aspect of the course, that it's compassion to self and compassion to others, and that the two are inextricably linked in that way. Because I think one of the resistances that people can have to a compassion course, or compassion, self-compassion in particular, is this kind of idea that it might be a little bit self-indulgent. I wondered if you could speak a bit to that, and sort of, how you would counteract or support somebody to explore that.
Yeah. Well, if you define compassion as one part is really a sensitivity to suffering, it really doesn't matter. Well, of course, it matters to you whether you are the sufferer or somebody else. But I mean, it's the sensitivity to really come close to this suffering and to feel into it and to feel what it needs. Where better can we start than with the suffering in ourselves, because that's our direct experience, if we allow it to be there. And of course, we need all our mindfulness skills to really offer it space, to look at it from all perspectives, and particularly this wider perspective, to hold it in our awareness, and then begin to relate to it with kindness. Like John Kabat-Zinn once said, the founder of MBSR, I can't say what mindfulness is in one word, but I can say it in two. It's awareness, and it is relationality. It's being aware of our experience, and it is relating to our experience. And of course, when our experience is joyful, we may respond with appreciation, with gratitude even. If our experience is painful, if it is really suffering, then kindness becomes compassion. And we need to relate to it in a compassionate way, to really tune into it. And when we develop this sensitivity with the suffering in ourselves, it automatically spreads to suffering in others. So the sensitivity, training this sensitivity, is not a selfish thing. You learn to relate to suffering, whoever is the sufferer.
Yes.
So what benefits yourself benefits others.
And I certainly find that personally the ripple effects are sort of most noticeable. Perhaps in my immediate family, I have a bit more patience with myself, and therefore I have a bit more patience with my teenage sons or my long-suffering husband. I'm able to just show up a bit more kindly in my role as a member of a family. Yeah.
Yes. For me, it started with being kinder to my patients, my colleagues, and it took a bit longer to be, because I had teenage sons by the time, and they often gave me back, "You're a compassion trainer, are you? You think you
I've
can
had
behave
that
like
too.
this?" Yes.
Yeah, they're great mirrors, aren't they?
Yeah.
One of the other things I'd love to hear your take on is the resistance people sometimes have to the word compassion, that it might be a bit soft or a bit fluffy.
I can definitely relate to that, because that's how I felt in the beginning as well. And Fritz can speak for himself when you interview him, but I'm sure he relates to that as well. We both had, when we started practicing with the metta meditation and the loving kindness meditation, we both had this feeling, oh, this is so soft, this is not a real thing. And we had a more, almost militaristic attitude towards what meditation is like. You simply observe. Well, it's a kind of awareness which is simply shining your light on what is, but this light can actually be quite bright and cold, like a laser light. And we felt meditation, certainly I did, that meditation was about shining your light on what shows, but not working with the tone of the light. And really, is this serving my experience as it is? Is this serving myself? Is this serving the other? When I bring mindfulness to this, what is actually the way I'm relating to this? It was this moving from just awareness to relating to what shows. And that is a whole different story, and it's not just soft. I mean, you really need a lot of courage to show up when your experience is pain.
Yes.
Because when you're in this awareness, well, you could also be aware from a distance. Oh, this is okay, it's there, but let me stay here and let it be far in the distance that I don't even have to dip a toe in it. But coming close to it, really relating to it, begins with tuning into it, feeling into it. And that takes courage.
Yes.
It's much more comfortable to be in a kind of dissociated state, not relating to your suffering, knowing it's there, but keeping your safe distance, rather than really relating to it. And when you begin to feel it, also to begin to ask, now what do you really need? What does this suffering need? And when it's another person, what does this person with his suffering need? And there you have to be brave.
And I love what you said about changing the tone or the colour of the light that you're shining. You know, sort of doesn't always have to be the sort of bright spotlight of kind of interrogation. Perhaps we could just put some mood lighting on it, make it a bit more gentle, and
Yeah.
Talking about courage, just to share a kind of a personal story of becoming more aware of habits. When I've been on 5-day retreats, I've not always found that a comfortable experience, because as I get quiet, I become more and more aware of my own inner chatter, and how critical that often is. And this program and this work of shining that light kindly, that kind tone, has just helped me relate to that differently. In the program, where you kind of invite participants to perhaps give their inner critic a persona, a character, perhaps a cartoon character, or I can really sort of relate to sort of Little Miss Grumble a bit more kindly, a bit more lightheartedly because of that. Because rather than, oh, what's wrong with me? Why am I being so grumpy? Blah blah blah.
Yeah, that's an important part that most participants go through in the course. It's relating to this inner storyteller and finding also that you have different storytellers inside. And the inner critic may be salient a lot of the time. We first need to become mindful of that. But then, how do you respond? Are you going to be critical to your inner critic? Well, that's more of the same, just on another level. Can we also be brave enough to embrace our inner critic with loving kindness? And yeah, what is actually the tone of an inner helper? What voice would it speak? That level, which has a lot more to do with our thinking and our emotional relationship with what we experience, and also the level of what we tend to call the inner animal inside, which we share with all mammalian animals, that we want to feel connected, we want to we want to feel safe in the presence of each other, and really take care for each other. That is a lot different state energetically than when we are in a threat state or in a drive state. So this inner animal, to explore that and to recognize the state it is in, is also very much basic to a compassionate attitude. It's not all high level stuff. You don't need to be very intellectual for it. You need to feel into it, what it takes to simply soothe the inner animal inside.
Yeah.
And let it feel at ease.
And this inner animal you're speaking to is kind of common to us all. It's
Sure.
it's a thread through humanity and mammalian life, this inner animal. I wonder if that links to how the program grew and how it's evolved. So you started to speak to how it had grown as a need for a follow-on program, and the need that you'd seen to support people in being a little bit, relating a little bit more kindly to themselves. So how's it grown and shifted and changed over time, perhaps?
Yeah, well, I think the basic ingredients have not shifted so much. We studied a lot in advance. We encountered the work of Paul Gilbert, the professor in clinical psychology from England, who developed the compassion-focused therapy. And he gave us a lot of, well, you could simply say science-based to it, and a language that was understandable in the healthcare among doctors and psychologists, with an evolutionary perspective on how we have evolved. And he put a lot of emphasis on getting the threat system, the drive system, and the soothing system back in balance. Because we so much, and you could relate that to the doing mode and the being mode in MBSR, we're so much in the driven doing mode all the time, getting away from what we don't want and getting towards what we want. So being in that kind of activity, the poor inner animal is all the time in a threat state or a drive state. But what it needs is the counterbalance of the soothing system, to feel at ease and to restore, to recover from the activities that go with the threat and drive systems. So that was an important, you could say, conceptual foundation of the course, but also experiential, because most people can relate to these different states quite easily. And on top of that came a lot of the practices for which you need language, you need understanding, that you could say the inner animal is the low road towards compassion. The high road is all our intellectual capacity to bring that in line with relating to suffering kindly, to say the right things, but also say it in the right tone. To work with imagery. I mean, our imagery can bring disaster when we have doom scenarios going on in our minds all the time. It brings the inner animal in threat or drive. But when our imagery is actually opening the space towards imagining a really safe place where you can be just as you are, or meeting a compassionate friend who really understands you, that has an enormous effect on us. Our imagination can be very powerful. And it doesn't matter whether the images are real. What matters is that the effects are real. And we can experience them directly and mindfully. So to work with, we say now the low road towards, I mean, it's not meant disrespectful. It's using the old systems in the body and in the brain that we share with all mammalian animals at least. And when it goes hand in hand with the higher road, with compassionate imagery, compassionate stories, then they can very much empower each other. And then, you could say that that's really the full picture of compassion, when our basic inner animal is in line with our inner storyteller and with our imagery and with our more noble intentions and the qualities of the heart.
Yes. So again, we've got this concept of integration coming in, integrating our physiology, the somatics, and the intellect, the thinking mind, and kind of bringing them perhaps into a bit closer harmony, understanding of one another, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these ingredients were there from the start. And of course, in details, we left a few things out, we added a few things. Generally can say, can be quite a full course if everything is new to you. But we asked our participants feedback session by session in the beginning. And usually when they say, this was a lot, it's a lot to take in. But when we asked, what shall we take out? No, leave it all in. It's very important, this. And I wish I'd learned this at school. But on the other hand, people have a lot of freedom. The course offers a lot of flexibility to follow your own path through this course. That's also kindness to yourself, to attune it to yourself in a way that it becomes accessible for you and digestible for you. So people take different routes through this course.
Yes.
And therefore, we left a lot of the things in, and there's quite a comprehensive book or reader attached to it, and quite a lot of practices. So there's a lot of material to practice with and to take in, but it's not that you have to read it from cover to cover in so many weeks. And it's not that you have to practice every day. You find the practices that relate to your situation here and now, and start from there. And the rest will come later.
And certainly I find that very valuable, both as a practitioner and as a teacher, that there's that liberation of choice, unlike those of us who are perhaps familiar with the MBSR or MBCT, where this is your homework this week, this is the practice.
Yeah.
There's an offer, there's a menu, as it were, and then based on what's most pertinent, what's most helpful for you that week, you can focus your attention there or there. And I found coming back to the program again, obviously I'm in a different place, my needs might have shifted and my focus then.
Sure.
Yeah. And I know that listening to the podcast, we'll have some people who are quite new to this, and some people who are already very familiar with it. So you spoke a bit about the influence that Paul Gilbert had on the course, but I know that there are also lots of threads of other thought leaders and compassion teachers that make the course so rich. Would you like to speak to that a bit, perhaps?
Yeah, the danger is here that I leave a few people out that I should mention. So, I mean, there have been many contributors from the world of compassion-focused therapy, from the world of acceptance and commitment therapy, particularly the work around acceptance, what life gives you in the way of suffering which you don't like. I mean, they've done a lot of work on that, but also to commit yourself to a valuable life, which links it more to the positive psychology school, which has also influenced us here. That is also important that it's not just about being aware of what is and practicing that, but also to finding out, what do I really value in life? What really matters to me? And can I bring my life in line to what really matters to me? So that's also become a part of the course in the latter half. And where it's also more, not just self-compassion, but also for many people, connecting to others. And let's face it, the world needs it more and more since we started the course. We now have come to a point that we were less aware of at that time, but that the whole planet is burning out. And there is such an urgent need to change something in our behavior, not to just take care of ourselves and to take care of others, but also to take care of nature, of all animals, plants, and the whole biosphere and climate. So it needs to expand. Well, the course is offering also those directions. Of course, you can't do that all in 8 weeks, and you can say it's a lifetime's work, and probably one lifetime is not enough. But it's helping us on a track on what we really value. So there's all kinds of things coming together here, of schools of thought, therapeutically, but also in a wider sense now, also how it links to ecology.
Yeah, thank you. So I thought it might be interesting to hear your perspective, Erik. If people are listening and kind of thinking, this sounds interesting. I'm wondering if the course might be for me or not. What words or sort of thoughts might you offer into that space?
Well, as this is a follow-on course, a deepening course, if you like, we like people to have already some familiarity with mindfulness practice, and preferably through MBSR or MBCT or an equivalent course. And there's quite a few around nowadays which offer these 8-week formats. Also, the motivation to really see the point of becoming kinder with themselves, to practice this kindness and compassion more explicitly. So these are often people who are aware of their inner critics. They're aware of there is still quite a lot of suffering going on, and despite their mindfulness practice, they need to deepen their practice, particularly in this field of relating to your suffering and being brave enough, courageous enough to really meet it and sense into it, to what it really needs, and being committed to alleviate your suffering and prevent further suffering. So these are really the motivations we're looking for. And of course, you can make this very demanding. It's not meant like that. It's really when you start this course, first look yourself into the eyes. Do I really want to get to know myself better, particularly in these darker corners? I mean, you don't have to go fully in and dive into your suffering, but really to do that in a gentle, kind way as well, step by step, and perhaps first dipping a toe in the suffering, and then see what that is like, and relating to that. And we all know the symbol of compassion that they use in Asia quite a lot, of the lotus, who needs to grow out its roots deep in the mud, in where it's not so nice. The deeper the plant grows into the mud, the more beautiful it blooms and flourishes into this beautiful lotus flower. So people who feel this makes sort of sense,
Yes.
and they may realize it's not a miracle cure. It doesn't happen just like that, but it's a path.
Yes.
And I'm committed to this path. I mean, they will probably benefit the most from this course.
Yes.
I may have expectations like, oh gosh, mindfulness was wonderful, and I like the group so much. Well, why not do another mindfulness course? And can do that. Also, the group connection alone, of course, the group connection is important. You do it together. But it's not simply, I want to do the same practices again, but really with this motivation also to take, to explore other areas.
Yes. I spend a lot of time in mud because I care for horses, so it's one of my favourite sayings. No mud, no lotus. Just sort of linking that into the programme, I think it might be helpful also just to highlight the aspect of the programme you were speaking to previously, that it does also invite us to really connect to things like our values and to spend some time savouring the things that bring us pleasure. One of the activities or practices that I come back to again and again in daily life is the pleasure walk. And and as somebody personally who discovered mindfulness because of my own sort of life history of depression, that those moments of just allowing myself to pause and take in the good, those can be so impactful as well. Those moments of connecting.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yes, and that also illustrates how important it is not to see compassion on its own. This is not a course just about relating to our suffering. It's also how do we relate to anything that life offers us, and also to take in the goodness in life. I like the work of Rick Hansen and people from the positive psychology work, that you really take it in deeply inside and also open your heart to that. And appreciative joy is another heart quality, which actually is developed hand in hand with compassion, with kindness, and with the other one, equanimity. I mean, actually, the course is about all four heart qualities as they have been distinguished in the Buddhist psychology. Kindness is the sort of basic attitude when we meet anything in life, but kindness becomes appreciative joy when life offers us something really nourishing and what does us good, and it becomes compassion when life offers us suffering. And we need, as a sort of ground tone to it all, the equanimity that everything passes, everything is impermanent, everything comes and goes. We can't hold on to the good. We can't keep away from the painful, but we need to hold it both as it comes and goes. So all these heart qualities have a place in the course.
Yeah, and I think that exploring those in that group setting, so beautiful, so valuable. I'm conscious our time's coming to a close, and it would be really nice to, before we do close, to offer people another practice. And I wondered if you'd guide us in a short practice again, Erik, just so people can get a real experience of some of the ways that we do that through the course.
Well, let me offer you a short practice that is really as a kind of continuous thread running through the course as an informal practice, which you can do anywhere, whether you're sitting, standing, or lying down, wherever it is safe to pause. And many people know it already from the basic mindfulness course. Certainly in MBCT, it's also the kind of backbone from the course, the breathing space. The breathing space, we added a few ingredients there in the MBCL. So just see how you experience that, and that might be a nice way of ending this session, which I'd like to thank you already for in advance, Kate. We haven't closed yet. But let's finish with this practice. So ring the gong again. Yeah, when we talk about mindfulness and compassion, then our minds may become busy again. And we may forget that we also have a body. And we also have a body in an environment. So this first phase of the breathing space is really about pausing, about reminding ourselves to be mindfully aware of whatever goes on right now. In our inner worlds and in the outer world, and in how these two meet with each other, are in relationship with each other. The senses that connect us to the world outside and inside. Becoming aware of sounds as sounds, thoughts as thoughts, feelings as feelings. Becoming aware of their feeling tone also, whether they're pleasant or unpleasant or something in between. And it's already kindness to welcome both, not to prefer one to the other. Of course, our first tendency might be to move toward the pleasant and move away from the unpleasant. But mindfulness is also about becoming aware of this reactivity that we tend to follow our likes and dislikes. But we don't have to do that. We can simply observe pleasantness and unpleasantness. And we can simply observe our judgmental mind, our likes, our dislikes, and give space to both. And in this second phase, we let our attention rest on the movements of the breath. Kindly directing our attention to the breath, and it may be as it is. We don't have to change it. That's often the way it is practiced in the breathing space when we first learn it. Here we add to this that we can consciously support the breath to find a soothing rhythm by very gently slowing it down somewhat, deepening it somewhat, allowing the out-breath to flow out all the way, until by itself it becomes an in-breath, and allowing the body to fill, until by itself the next out-breath will follow. We don't have to force it. we can allow it to happen, that the breath finds a natural, calm rhythm with this soothing quality, hand in hand with sensing the ground that we're sitting on, that we're supported by the earth, by our seats, that we can allow our gravity to bind us to the earth and to soften our muscles, that we don't have to work against gravity. We can simply allow the body to rest on this soothing breathing rhythm, allowing all muscles to soften while we breathe. Perhaps supported by an inner smile, perhaps supported by a gentle touch of a hand on the belly or on the region of the heart, anything that may support this inner animal to be at ease. And gradually expanding our awareness in the third phase, where we are aware of the body as a whole, the entire body as it rests in our awareness. The breathing body. And attuning to ourselves with kindness. Sensing how we sit here, in what state we are, bodily, emotionally, mentally. How do we actually meet ourselves when we meet ourselves with kindness? You simply ask yourself, what would be kindness to me right now? And perhaps a word comes up, a sentence, a wish. Traditionally, there have been these basic wishes that most people can relate to. May I feel safe? May I feel free from suffering? May I feel healthy as can be? Or may I feel happy? May I enjoy life? May I enjoy the goodness in life? Or maybe, may I be at ease with the ups and downs in life, with the comings and goings in life? Maybe you relate to one of these traditional wishes, but don't hesitate to allow your words to well up from your heart. And what would be a way of kindly relating to your inner needs right now? And allowing this wish of kindness to flow through you on the rhythm of the soothing breath. Supported by an inner smile, gentle touch, connecting the giver and receiver inside. You're offering this to yourself from your kindness, and you're also receiving it. How is it received? Mindfully noticing what happens moment by moment, and attuning to what happens with kindness. And of course, you can expand this practice in any way you like. can allow the kindness to flow to other persons dear to you, persons known to you. You can allow this kindness to flow to the nature around, to anywhere where kindness is needed, without forcing it. Let it be a natural flow that flows from your heart to wherever it is needed. Well, thank you so much for joining into this practice.
Thank you, Erik. What a wonderful way to sort of wrap our conversation up with the beautiful 3-step breathing space with kindness. And as you say, it really is a sort of a thread through the course, or a backbone. That it's one of the practices that I come back to again and again. So it's been such a privilege to have this time, have this conversation, and to hear some perspectives on the story of how MBCL came about that I've not heard before. So thank you so much.
Thank you again for inviting me to do this, and may it serve everybody who listens to this podcast.
That's my heartfelt wish too. So thank you very much, and go well. Thank you for joining us for today's episode. It's my heartfelt wish that this podcast, in its own small way, contributes to the spread of mindfulness and compassion in our world. If you like the podcast, please subscribe and follow it. And if you have friends who may be interested, please share it with them too. And if you'd like to find out more about me and my work, including the Mindfulness-Based Compassionate Living group course and one-to-one coaching, you can do so at my website, www.realisemindfulness.com. Please do keep listening, and if you'd like to keep in touch, it would be wonderful to hear from you. So, until next time, wishing you ease and kindness in the flow of life.